Oh, damn, I think I'm marked for death. Let's get into it. That's right, we are talking about 1990's Marked for Death starring Steven Seagal. Now, in 1990, Steven Seagal had two movies come out that year. In February 1990, he had Hard to Kill. In October of 1990, that's when this film was released, Marked for Death. When Hard to Kill was a hit, Fox actually gave the production and added an extra $1 million onto their budget. Now, Steven Seagal is in this film with John Hatcher. The great Keith David plays Max, his friend. They kind of know, they don't get in a little backstory that they might have served together in the military, but they've been friends for a very long time. Basil Wallace is in here as Screwface, the main villain and drug kingpin, Jamaican. We got Danielle Harris in here as John Hatcher's niece. We got the great Peter Jason makes an appearance, a very small appearance as John Hatcher's boss, and Danny Trejo is in this movie briefly in the beginning of this film. Now, this movie was made on a budget of $12 million, and when it was released in October of 1990, it opened at number one and it made $11.7 million opening weekend. And then it went on to gross $46 million in the U.S. and $57.7 million worldwide. So this was a hit for Steven Seagal, coming off of the hit that was Hard to Kill. This is what propelled him into Out for Justice next and then on to Under Siege. And the filmmaker who directed this film is Dwight Little. Dwight Little, Steven Seagal had seen Halloween 4 and was very impressed and recommended Dwight Little to do this film. Dwight Little had done Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund the year before this. He did this film, and then after this film, he went on to do Rapid Fire with Powers Booth and Brandon Lee. If you've never seen that film, I highly recommend it. It's a very cool action movie from the early 90s and very well directed. There's some really well directed action scenes in that film, and Brandon Lee knocks it out of the park, and Powers Booth is always awesome. So if you've never seen that one, I highly recommend Rapid Fire. Eventually I'll do a review down the line on that one. Now this movie opens up with John Hatcher and his partner. They're DEA agents and they're in Mexico doing a drug buy to try to get some cartel members, something like that. They don't really go into the players. They're tourists in Mexico and they're trying to buy drugs off these drug dealers. This is where we see Danny Trejo, because at the beginning of the movie they're chasing Danny Trejo. They catch him, throw him in the trunk of the car, and by the time they meet with these people, Danny Trejo has been discovered out of the car because people have seen them tracing him, and everybody knows they're cops. And they fight their way out of it, as Steven Seagal always does in most of these movies. But his partner gets killed on their way out by a prostitute. She shoots him He busts the door open and she turns around and shoots him. And he decides that he does not want to do this anymore, and he goes to his boss, who's played by Peter Jason, and tells him he's done. He doesn't want to do this anymore. They're not making a difference. The drugs are still flowing into the U.S., and he doesn't see a point. And Peter Jason doesn't want him to quit, so he says, why don't you just take a leave of absence, take a month, take 2 months, whatever. And he goes back to Chicago to visit his family. This is where we're introduced to his sister, and Danielle Harris playing his niece in the film. And it's a reunion of sorts, and they're happy to see him. He hadn't been home in a long time, and they're kind of having a little get-together when he gets home. And then the next day, he goes to see his friend, played by Keith David, who's a football coach at a local high school. And they have a good rapport together. Keith David's always good, and he plays his friend really well in the film. And they kind of play off of each other really well. And Keith David's always elevates whatever movie he's in, because he's always really good in whatever movie he's in, definitely. And you can see these Jamaican guys selling drugs to these young kids, and Keith David takes it personally because he had a football player who got busted with cocaine possession, and he knows these guys are just dealing drugs in town, and he's really pissed about it, and Steven Seagal has to calm him down. And we're introduced to our main bad guy, played by Basil Wallace, Screwface, who's in charge of the Jamaicans, and they're trying to, the Colombians are trying to have a peace treaty with the Jamaicans, and that doesn't go really well. We go to a scene where Keith David's character and Steven Seagal's character go to his bar for a few drinks. There's Colombians in there. The Jamaicans show up, and there's a shootout. And Steven Seagal ends up kicking the one Jamaican's ass, and he tells him that he's a dead man. And that's when there's a drive-by shooting a couple days later. Danielle Harris's character gets hit by a bullet, and now Steven Seagal is ready to kick some ass, and that's pretty much it's pretty much the movie. There's some really good action scenes in this film. They're very well filmed. The fight scenes are well choreographed, and they're well filmed by Dwight Little. He did a really nice job with it. There are some cuts in the movie that don't make a lot of sense, but the movie was cut down to get the R rating because there was more violence originally, from what I read. So if you see some odd cuts in certain scenes, it's only because they cut it down. Like I said, the fight scenes are really well. Steven Seagal takes it to these guys, and then him, Keith David, and this Jamaican cop who's helping the FBI in our country try to take down Jamaican mob, I guess, for lack of a better word. They decide they armor up and they go to Jamaica to hit Screwface at his house. They end up they raid his house during a party. Steven Seagal ends up killing him by cutting his head off. And they go back to Chicago, and Steven Seagal takes his head and shows the rest of the gang, says, "Get the f out, or I'm gonna kill all of yous." And that's when Screwface's twin brother shows up and kills the Jamaican cop. And Steven Seagal and him have a knockdown, drag out fight up in the club upstairs. Steven Seagal ends up killing him, and that's the end of the film. And that's pretty much Marked for Death. This is definitely one of Steven Seagal's better films too. I know Under Siege is my favorite, but this is up there with one of my favorites of his. It's really well done. Like I said, yeah, Dwight Little does a good job shooting the action scenes, which you'll know if you ever watch Rapid Fire. You'll see that he's pretty good at directing action scenes. Unfortunately, after Rapid Fire, he more went into TV instead of film. But hey, that guy has got to work, right? But yeah, it's a well-done film. Steven Seagal in the movie. Keith David's really good. All the supporting cast is good. Basil Wallace is really good as Screwface, the bad guy. And it's a hard R action film. It's definitely unapologetically hard R, no doubt. They throw in some voodoo elements in there with the Jamaican culture, which are really handled pretty well. And at the end of the day, I really like this film. I always have. I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. It's definitely a well-done R-rated action film, and definitely one of Steven Seagal's better ones. So yeah, if you've never seen Marked for Death, I highly recommend it, obviously by my rating. Have you seen this film? Let me know down below. What is your favorite Steven Seagal film? He has a lot of pretty decent ones, especially early on in his career. But that's it for me. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video if you like, and I will be back soon with another review. Thanks, and have a great day.